Okay, welcome back, Sanhedrin folk. We're on Chaf Bet Amad Aleph, 22a, and we are talking about um, divorce, about first the first wife, and how important it is not to divorce frivolously, and how difficult it is to lose one's first spouse. This is what the Gemara is talking about. And if you recall, it was all on the back of the bedwarmer, Avishag, who David Hamelech, it was brought to David Hamelech at the end of his life to bring him warmth. The story, how did we get into this whole divorce and first wife business? Because he refused to marry her.
That's because he had 18 wives. Yeah.
That's right, exactly.
He refused.
He refused to marry her, and he said, I can't marry you. She said, come on, marry me. And he said, I can't marry you. I've got 18 wives.
But why aren't we looking? Isn't this a little bit back to front? The halakha, or whatever it is, was decided because he had 18 wives, not he only had 18 wives because there was some halakha.
Well, there's a chicken and egg because he knew the halakha that you weren't allowed to have too many, and either it was already decided or he decided that 18 was it.
What about Shlomo?
Shlomo was a naughty boy. Shlomo had 1,000 wives. He was a naughty boy. So David had 18 wives. Avishag said, marry me. And he said, I can't marry you because I've got 18 wives. And so what could he have done? He could have divorced one of them. And that's how we got into this. The Gemara said, look how important the concept of not getting divorced is. They even allowed David Hamelech to be on his own, as it were, yichud with Avishag, rather than get him to divorce a wife and marry her. Yes, Julia, I can see you're itching to tell us something.
No, not at all. But actually,
No.
I've just realised that I should wish Avril Mazel Tov because her daughter just got married this week.
Mazal Tov, Avril, lovely news. Very nice. Yeah, we can Mazal Tov from all of us.
Cool.
Right. Okay. Well, we're talking about marriage and divorce. We'll not talk about the divorce bit here. We'll concentrate on the marriage and the positive aspects. Let's go to the Gemarah. I'm sharing it with you on the screen for those on Zoom. And I want to show you just this bit over here, just a recap. Amar Rav Shemen bar Abba. At the bottom of the page here, Johnny, it's on the bottom of your page 130. Amar Rav Shemen bar Abba. Bo urei, come and see kama kashin gerushin, how harsh, how difficult the concept of divorce is. Shaharei David Hamelech, with regard to the King David, hitiru lo leyached, they permitted him to be secluded with Avishag without marrying her. Below hitiru lo legaresh, and they did not permit him to divorce one of his wives in order that he could marry Avishag. So from this piece of Gemarah here, it would imply that maybe David did want to marry Avishag, but they didn't allow it because they said you can't just frivolously divorce one of your wives. You can't do that. It's not right. So that was how we got into this subject.
Didn't have permission to be with the bedwarmer from them, did they?
They didn't ask permission.
Permission to be with the bedwarmer.
Well, they brought him. The bedwarmer was brought to him. He didn't request the bedwarmer. If you look in the Tanakh, it says they brought him a bedwarmer because he was weak and cold and old.
I can be very naive here and say maybe she was like a hot water bottle.
Yeah.
Wait a second, and you put it in, and then when he comes to bed, the bed's warm, and she gets out.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe. I think I said this before. My dad always used to like that Haftorah for the Haftorah of Chayei Sarah, because he said this is the first electric blanket, right? And that's what you did with your electric blanket, innit? You put it on, and it warmed up your bed for when maybe,
And
yeah.
that's why she's called a bed
They
warmer.
could have used
and
bricks
not
if they wanted
something
to do
else.
that.
Say
I
that
think
again, Julia.
They would have used bricks,
Yeah.
or some. You can heat up bricks and put it on a fire, and then you move it to the bed. I don't think that's a really feasible suggestion. That it was
Okay,
just to warm
so
the
Julia
bed.
doesn't like your suggestion, Hannah, that she thinks we'd use a hot brick, possibly. Yeah. I have to say that maybe this is a male thing, but a young girl, obviously very hot, a hot young girl coming into an old man's bed to warm his bed. I don't think you have to have a huge imagination really to tell you what's likely to go on here. But clearly, the Gemara tells us nothing went on because, according to this Gemara,
Told Julia from me that a bed warmer has got a very much larger surface area than a brick.
You're obviously
More than
they
one
don't-
brick. I mean, it's quite possible to heat up a bed without using a human
I'm also
person. And in fact, if you put me in the
Obviously.
bed, I wouldn't warm it up because I'm always freezing cold. So I can't actually see that suggestion works.
okay, well,
I'm
Julia's
sorry.
not happy with the whole concept of a bed warmer, but that's what the
No,
Tanakh
I'm
tells
not
us.
unhappy with the concept of a bed warmer in the manner that you were discussing. I'm saying that if you put somebody in a bed and take it out before the other person enters, then I do not think that was necessary, and that there were other alternatives.
Okay, so okay, let's move on. Yes, Jeff.
Tanakh here, learning about Amnon
Amnon and
and
Tamar.
Tamar, which ended very badly. And that was David's son.
Yes,
And possibly daughter.
yes.
So is there a thing here which says that David wouldn't ever touch Abishag in any sort of way because he knows the consequences of what could happen as a result of any, I'm just saying that he considered a safe
pair of hands. Pardon the expression. Okay, so Jeff is suggesting that David HaMelech, in a way, what Jeff is saying here is that David HaMelech is above all of this. He's above all of this. He wouldn't dream of
because he knows the consequences of
right. And this Gemara would fit with that because we know that from the Gemara earlier on that he wasn't capable because he brought Bathsheba to prove that he was capable. And so that may well be, but David did not fall in the same way that Amnon did. But we don't have to go back very far in David HaMelech's life itself. But the whole issue of Bathsheba, he did fall in that regard, didn't he? So
maybe that's his decision.
Exactly. Why do we say this is all falling into place a bit now, isn't it? Why do we say that David HaMelech was so great? Not because he didn't sin, right? He did sin with Bathsheba, but he said chatati. And what does the Rambam say about full teshuvah? In order to do full teshuvah, you have to be tested in the same way that you failed before the teshuvah. And so maybe this episode with Avishag at the end of David's life is exactly that test that the Rambam speaks about, and Jeff's idea that David was, by this time at least, above all of that because he had done complete teshuvah, that fits very nice. All of those pieces of that jigsaw puzzle actually fits very nicely, doesn't it? No, Julia, you're not happy with that?
Well, his sin was with a married woman.
Yeah, Avishag was allowed to him basically.
No, she wasn't, because
as a concubine,
he had 18 wives.
as a concubine as opposed to a wife.
Exactly.
I asked you the question a couple of weeks ago about in the other shiur about whether you believe that a man and a woman could have a platonic relationship. And you said yes on the basis that it's both sides platonic.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I don't understand why everything between, I'm sorry, Jonathan, I'm naive maybe, but I don't understand why everything between a man and a woman has to be carnal.
Okay. Well, it doesn't
Can
have to
I
be,
just
but
say that here it says, now the king was very old, and Abishag the Shunammite ministered to the king. I mean, it's a quite active role.
Yeah. I didn't hear what
so Julia said that the passage says that she was misharetet. She ministered to the king,
okay.
and it was an active role. This Gemarah, of course, goes against what Hannah has said. I'm not saying that there isn't such a thing as a platonic relationship. I do believe that there is. This was not, because
a carer?
she was a carer. But this Gemarah says, and earlier on, if you just go back a little bit, what we see is that Avishag said, "I want to have a relationship with you." So it wasn't platonic from her side, Hannah. You can only have a platonic relationship if both sides are platonic. Otherwise, you have what's called unrequited love, right? Or unrequited lust in Amnon's case.
You can't have a platonic relationship in a bed situation, I wouldn't have thought. You can have it in a public situation, but not in bed, really.
Okay, let me remind you,
We should
everyone.
move on.
Let me remind you, everyone, of a Gemarah that we learnt some time ago, did we not? Of somebody called Paltiel.
Yes, we put a sword.
That was
between them.
exceptional, and there
They
was
had
a
a
sword.
sword.
There was a
didn't they?
sword.
There was a sword, okay, which I suppose you could argue both ways, couldn't you? You could say it's so impossible to have this situation that you need a sword in the bed.
Yeah.
Paltiel, who was the lady involved? Anybody remember?
Michal.
Michal, well done. Yes, excellent. Michal and Paltiel. Um, but, and I suppose in some ways that's a support for Avril, that so difficult was this situation that you have a man and a woman who are in an intimate situation, which Paltiel and Michal were. I mean, officially they were a man and wife, and yet it would have been impossible had it not been for this sword, whether it was a physical sword or a metaphorical sword in the bed, to prevent Paltiel from
But he stresses that the Gemarah stresses that David was old.
Yeah, but the Gemarah tells us that he wasn't that old. He managed to have relations with Bathsheba 13 times on the trot. So, he might have been old, but he
Johnny,
wasn't infirm.
Can
Yes,
I make
Jackie.
a point? One thing is not quite 100% here. When there's a marriage, the woman has to be under the chuppah. When it comes to divorce, the man can go to the Beis Din without the wife and divorce her, and then the Beis Din give the wife the get. So if he'd have really wanted to get divorced, he could arrange the Beis Din and got a get.
Yeah, but the Beis Din didn't allow him. That's what the Gemara says. Lo hitiru lo. They never allowed him to have a divorce. By the way, do you know the reason that when you do a divorce, you do it through the Beis Din and not directly?
Not to shame.
No, they don't want a scene. They don't want a scene because many divorces are acrimonious. And so, if you've got the man and the woman there and the man has to actually hand the get to the woman, that's a very, potentially a very problematic issue that could upset either one party or both, and it could all kick off. So, Bashita, that's how they do it. You do it through a shaliach. You don't actually do it both people, directly to the person, face to face. Yeah. Okay, so that's how we got into this whole business. Let's go back to the Gemara, and we did this. We started this little bit of Gemara last time. We said this. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Kol ha'megareshet ishto rishona, afilu mizbeach morid alav dema'ot." Remember, we did this last time. Somebody who divorces his first wife, even the altar of Hashem, shed tears about it, and then he brings a pasuk from Malachi, which we did. So it's a very serious business. That's what the idea of the Gemara. And then we did this bit as well. It's 2 weeks ago because we didn't learn last week because of Erev Shavuot. So that's why I'm just going over what we did last time. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'itema Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yochanan said, and some says it was Rabbi Eliezer. Ein ishto shel adam meita ela im kein mevakshim mimenu mamon ve'ein lo. Man's wife does not die unless his creditors ask him for money that he owes and he doesn't have it. And he quotes a pasuk from Mishlei, which says, if you do not have with what to pay, why should he take away your bed from under you? And that means it's a euphemism for your wife. And there's a little note there. Let's have a look what Rav Steinsaltz says about that note. He says, Rashi says, this refers to money that one has stolen. Okay, if you steal money and you do not return it, as a punishment for not returning it, the thief suffers the loss of his wife. Tosfot there explains it refers to one who does not fulfill his vow to give money to charity. So this is not just somebody who owes money stam. This is somebody, a bad man. He's stolen stuff, or he's promised to give money to a particular charitable cause, and then he defaults from that pledge. Tosfot says a vow, so presumably he's made a firm promise, and he doesn't do so. Says Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yochanan. If in that situation, then the pasuk in Mishlei tells us that the punishment for that could be the loss of one's wife. Okay, that's where we got to last time. Let's carry on. So we're now going to go down here to Rabbi Alexandri. Here we go. This is very interesting. Gemarah, we're going to come up in a minute, a very famous midrash in a moment. But let's first of all, Rabbi Alexandri. Rabbi Alexandri says, Kol Adam shemeita ishto b'yamav. Any man whose wife dies in his days, in other words, dies before him, olam chashech ba'ado. His world becomes darkened, which is understandable. And he quotes a pasuk in Eov, and I'll take you to that pasuk now. It's a pasuk in Job chapter 18, verse 6. And it says here, Or chashach ba'ohalo, the light shall become dark in his tent, v'neiro alav yidach, and his candle that is upon him shall go out. Now, this is the reason this pasuk is mentioned here is because of this word ohalo, tent. We said earlier on that the bed is a euphemism for the wife. The tent is also a euphemism for the wife. Bayit, a house, is also a euphemism for the wife. Why? Why are all those things a euphemism for the wife? Because the wife makes the house, the wife makes the home. If you're lucky, the wife makes the bed in the morning, but that's not always necessarily the case. That was just a joke. Okay, don't shoot me. Right. So
there's also another reason, possibly, that when Eliezer brings Rivka back, the light comes back to Sarah's tent.
Bediuk. We have that famous midrash, isn't there? That when Sarah died, the light over this Ner Tamid, as it were, this light over Sarah's tent was extinguished, and it stayed extinguished until the next generation, Rivka came, and Rivka came into Sarah's tent. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the pasuk says that Yitzchak took her into the tent of his mother, and the Midrash says that the light, this miraculous light of Sarah, was rekindled. Look at this whole pasuk. That's why I brought this. That's why I wanted to spend a minute or two on this pasuk. I'll say the pasuk again, and you'll understand in the light of that midrash why I did it. Or chashach ba'ohalo. The light went dark in his tent. Sarah died. V'neiro alav yidach, and his candle that is over him, neir, the light that is over him, shall go out. Only later, when the next generation, when Rivka came in, was that light rekindled. And that is the way of generations, isn't it? One generation passes on, and you pass the light and the baton onto the next generation, right? And if you're fortunate enough to see the next generation, if you're fortunate enough to see, your child under the chuppah, then that's a very big zechut. If you're fortunate enough to see a grandchild under the chuppah, that's an even greater zechut. It's not many generations ago that was unusual.
Very rare.
Yeah. How many of us Ashkenazim are named after our grandparents? Right? Me. Right? Meaning that our grandparents died before we were born.
But you were in England. I grew up with a whole generation where our grandparents were all slaughtered.
It
was only lucky that our parents made it.
Even more so, correct. How many of our grandparents were, as you say, slaughtered in various historical things? This is only a fairly recent thing that a person has the merit to see a grandchild under the chuppah. That's a big deal. I don't think we should, I think perhaps we've currency has been, inflation, that we don't really realize that there's we trivialize it, yeah. And this here is this pasuk here, and the midrash that Hannah has just told us about the light going back on, as it were, when Rivka entered the tent, I think is an indication of the significance of passing on our traditions. And that's what I was talking about this morning in shul, actually, after shul, and in the halacha, I was talking about, just for those that weren't here, I was talking about the tension between keeping our minhagim from our families and changing our minhagim now that we're in Eretz Yisrael. There's a tension between jettisoning stuff that's important from the past and recognizing the fact that we are now all in Eretz Yisrael, and with all from Kibbutz Goliyot, from all the different places, with all the different minhagim. There's a strong movement that wants to create, as it were, a new Nusach Eretz Yisrael, as opposed to keeping our Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Sfard, Nusach Teiman, whatever it is. And it's a very difficult, delicate, fine balance between the two. And everybody will have their own sort of position on that spectrum. There'll be those, for instance, Robert, who I've got tremendous respect for. He feels that we should scrap all our old minhagim, and we should have minhag Eretz Yisrael, and, as it were, wipe the board clean, reboot. We're all back here now, and I get it. On the other hand, I'm a stickler, I'm a killer for nostalgia. Whenever I go into a bookshop, the first thing I do is look at, the old history books with the photographs of. I was telling Elisheva the other day, I spent a ridiculous half an hour or so having a conversation with AI, a ridiculous conversation with a robot, right? Why did I have this mad conversation? Because it was spring bank holiday Monday in England, which used to be called
Mayday.
not Mayday. Mayday's the beginning of bank holiday.
Whitsun.
Whitsun, that's right. Thank you, David. It used to be called Whitsun, Whit Week. And in Manchester, particularly in Manchester and Salford, they had, and they had them all over, but they were particularly strong. They had the Whit Walks. The Whit Walks, right? Now, yeah, I can see Avril's nodding.
Yes,
Right? The Whit Walks. Well, the Whit Walks were a massive part of my family. Why? Because my parents' clothes shop was in Salford. Salford was Regent Road. So Regent Road in Salford. Salford was the centre of these Whit Walks. They were massive in Salford. My parents' shop made, I don't know, I'm percentage wise, I'm guessing here, but they made probably 50% of their yearly income from Christmas and wit. And wit actually was more than Christmas because every child in the entire diocese had to have a new dress for the Wit Walks, and they were all white. And in Salford, Baruch Hashem, they all came to my parents' shop to get their wit dresses. So how did I get into this mad conversation? Yeah, they used to parade. They had a walk all the way through.
Must have been a very local thing. So there's nothing like that.
No, it's not. It's northwest of England, particularly, but it's a Christian thing. It's a Christian thing. It's all about Pentecost. Yeah, Whit Sunday. Yeah, Palm Sunday and Whit Monday. It was the walks were on Whit Monday. They had flags and banners and everything. Look it up. Anyway, so how did I get into this mad conversation with AI? Because it was Spring Bank Holiday Monday, which used to be called Whit Monday, and something popped into my head. I said, I wonder when the Whit Walks stopped. So I went to AI. And I said, when did the Whit Walks stop in Salford? Right, and it told me a whole thing about the Whit Walks, and they stopped in the early 70s. They changed the name of the bank holiday in 1971 in England, and that was the end of the Whit Walks, basically. And then it said the Whit Walks, and it said, and all the kids used to have new dresses. And then I started this conversation with them. I said, yeah, I know, my parents used to, right? I said, maybe you can find me a picture. And then it found a photograph of my parents' shop on Regent Road in 1974, and I'm starting to have this whole conversation with this AI about my parents' shop. Why are we talking about this, by the way? I have no idea. Get into this. I don't remember how we got onto this subject.
Generations.
Oh, generations.
Where
That's
we
right.
started.
Minhagim. That's how we got onto this. So yeah, I said that I'm a big nostalgia. I'm a big nostalgia freak. So I'm unhappy with Robert's approach to say, ditch everything from the past and let's start afresh. Well, no, I don't think he is wrong, and I don't think I'm wrong either. And that's why I think there is this tension between keeping minhag. I don't know how we've got onto that from here, but we did. I know how, because the next generation, we're passing on the next baton of the next generation. That's how we got onto it. Yes, Hannah.
When all the tribes were in Israel, I imagine they all prayed, and did they pray the same?
Okay. Excellent question.
And the answer I was given was that they all prayed differently. Each tribe had its own prayers, and each tribe prayed differently.
Okay, so I think we need to just be a little careful about this. First of all, I'm not sure there was any such thing as prayer or fixed prayer at the time when all the tribes were in Israel. Remember, the time when all the tribes were in Israel was a very, very short period of time before the 10 tribes were exiled. So in terms of history, it was only a short period of time. At that time, there wasn't such a thing as prayer as such. There was avodah. There was avodah in the Mishkan. Now, what is clear is that there were certainly different nuances to the way the tribes served Hashem. We know this from the concept of the which we talked about in one, I think, in the Tefillah Shir, the Shnei Mezrei Gisrei Yamsuf, the 12 channels in the Yamsuf in the Red Sea. They didn't all go through one channel, it's a bit muddy. It was, they all had their own channel. Each tribe had its own channel because although they were all going in the same direction towards the service of Hashem and towards Eretz Israel, they all did it in a slightly different way. And so I think that is a support for your view, even though it might not have been prayer as such, but that's developed. We all have all these different nuschaot, right? Nusach Sfard, Nusach Ashkenaz, Nusach Teiman, Nusach Edot HaMizrach, Nusach Italki, Nusach Tripolai, Nusach Morocai, all of these different Nusach Yekish, the Yekas Nusach, the pure Ashkenaz, etc. Nusach Anglia. And again, it's a tension between keeping beautiful minhagim and modernizing and coming together in Eretz Israel. I don't know what the answer is, and the answer will be different to different people. Okay, so the Ethiopians are completely a different situation altogether because, of course, they were cut off from the rest of Bnei Israel much earlier. So their minhagim, in some ways, are unrecognizable. If you were to just take all the different minhagim that we've mentioned, Sfard, Ashkenaz, we'd recognize, and they might be slightly different here and there, but we would generally recognize. An Ashkenazi would generally recognize what's going on in a Sephardi shul. You might get a bit lost in the order they do things and what have you. But if we were to go to an Ethiopian shul, we won't have a clue.
Surely
right?
theirs is nearer the truth, though.
Well, you could argue that. Jonathan said
shuls?
maybe theirs is nearer the truth. You could argue that. On the other hand, just as our methods of prayer, I'm talking about Ashkenazim now, our methods of prayer have been very heavily influenced by the church. The Sephardi North African Jews have been heavily influenced by Islam because that's what around them. I'm assuming that the Ethiopian Jews will have been influenced by the culture around them as well. So whilst you might think that they are more authentic than us, they certainly do have certain minhagim which we don't do anymore. And I found out one of these literally this month. I had a first, everybody. I have never until this month officiated at a Britah before. Okay, some people would call it a Zeveda Bat. It was a welcoming ceremony for a girl, right? We've had them here in the shul here. Rav Ido had made. I think Rav Yuval had one as well for his daughter. It's basically a party that says, we welcome the girl into. We don't actually do a Brit, obviously, but it's called a Britah, Zeved Abat, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so I was invited to one of these, and I was asked to sort of, like run the show, as it were. This was in the shul here a couple of weeks ago. The father was a pure Ashkenazi, okay, born in the UK, brought up in the US. The mother is an Ethiopian. I'm not sure if she came here as a baby or she was born here. I can't remember now. I think she came here as a baby. This ceremony took place on the 80th day of this girl's life. And none of the Ashkenazim, or Sephardim actually, none of the people around knew why it was done on the 80th day.
10 times 8, that's the boy.
No, it's because the lady, that's when the lady comes.
8 days of the bread.
Yeah, have a look in Parshat Tazria. Isha ki yelda zachar.
Days.
Wait, Isha ki yelda zachar. When a woman has a male child, I'll just rather than quote it incorrectly, I'll just go to the pasuk. I've got a chumash handy here. Here you go. Wait, you're here. Wait. Ishaki, here we go. Ishaki tazriya v'yalda zachar. A woman who has a baby boy, v'tama shivat yamim, she's ritually impure for 7 days. Uvayom hashmini yimol b'sar olato, and on the 8th day he has his bris. Ushloshim yom ushloshet yamim teshev b'dmei tahara. For 33 further days she sits what's called dmei tahara to become pure again. 7 plus 33, 40. Okay, very good. Ve'im nekevate leid, if she has a girl, v'tama shvu'ayim kenidata, she is 2 weeks ritually impure, 14 days. V'shishim yom v'sheshet yamim teishev al demei tahora. 66 days she sits until she's pure. 66 and 14, folks? 80. So in the Ethiopian culture, on the 80th, the woman, after having had a girl, sits outside the camp, michutz lamachaneh, outside the camp for 80 days. And on the 80th day, she comes back in the camp and they have a big party. And there was all sorts of different minhagim that Winnie, who's the mother of this baby, told me about. Fascinating, right? So you're telling me whoever it was that said they're more authentic, certainly on that regard, they're more authentic because they are keeping bidiot what it says in Parashat Ki Tazria. Remarkable. So, are we going to say, we're going to ditch that and make the Ethiopians ditch that because, well, we don't do that now. We're all in Eretz Israel, so we have to. I think that would be a very sad thing. So it's a very difficult.
There's a difference between minhagim and nusach tefillah.
Say that again, David. Sorry.
There's a huge difference between minhagim of different communities and the nusach of tefillah.
I agree. There is a difference. I don't know that there's a huge difference. I don't know that there's a huge difference in concept, David. In concept, we're talking about the same idea, which is, do we uniformize? That's not a right word, is it? What's the right word? Standardize. Do we standardize everything in terms of tefillah, in terms of minhag?
So interestingly, when I don't know if it's still the case today, but when my kids enlisted in the army, they were all given a siddur, which was nusach achid. So it has tefillot from all the different minhagim and puts them all into one, so everyone could daven the same nusach.
Okay, so that's the opinion of Robert. For those of you who don't know, Robert Azarad is a French guy who comes to our shul, lovely man, and he's very, very keen on this, and that's exactly what he says, David, that we should be pushing towards to unify and standardize the tefillah. That's not to say we'll all become Nusach Sfard or all become Nusach Ashkenaz, but it will be this, as you've said, David, this Nusach Achid, this unified Nusach. And that is certainly one end of the spectrum.
That's all part of being Jewish. That it's impossible to unify even 10 Jews together.
Wasn't that the intention of Nusach Safard to unify everybody?
Well, the Nusach, you mean the Nusach Sfard that we done in our shul?
Because it brought the Sephardi and the Ashkenaz together somewhere in the middle, and they was hoping it would be a unifying tefillah.
I don't know what the initial theory behind it was, but the fact of it is that Nusach Ashkenaz was the existing Nusach. There was a Nusach Ari, which was the Nusach of the Ari HaKadosh, and the Hasidim in the 18th century, maybe 17th century, took parts of the Nusach Ari and combined it with Nusach Ashkenaz and made their new Nusach, which was they called Nusach Sfard, which was very confusing because it's nothing to do with Sfaradim. They were Ashkenazim that did this. They were Hasidim. It would have been much better to call it Nusach Chasidut or something. It would have been far less confusing. But that's how it came about. Whether the intention, Michael, was to unify the Kabbalists, the Kabbalists and the Mitnagdim, I'm not so sure, because that was a battle that between the Mitnagdim and the Hasidim, which is still going on even to this day. But anyway, that's we've not done very much Gemarah, have we? So that pasuk in Eov is quoted in the Gemarah. Let's go back to the Gemarah for a moment. Where are you, Gemarah? There you go. Have you got the Gemarah on the screen now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So Rabbi Alexandri says that the light goes out, and he quotes this pasuk. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, he has another thing that he says about the situation when a person's spouse dies. Pesiotav mitkatzrot. His steps get shorter. What does that mean? His steps get shorter if your first wife dies.
You've got
Now,
no koyach.
got no koyach. Yeah, if you think about a person's walking, when you see somebody who is, it's even an English expression. If you see a person who's confident, a person who is, got a spring in his step, right? We use that expression, don't we? A spring in his step. It means somebody's happy. He's got, right? And another English expression, to stride out. Right? You see somebody making big strides, that gives you the impression of confidence. Somebody who's lacking in confidence, somebody who is perhaps depressed, somebody who is upset, they're not so striding out, right? Their steps are shortened. And I think that's what Rabbi Hanina here is talking about. That, and he quotes the same chapter of Eov. So let me take you back to Eov now. Verse 7, the very next verse in Eov says, Yetzru tza'adei ono. The steps of his strength shall be straightened, not straightened with a GH, straightened as in. Yeah, well, yeah. I'm saying the translation on the screen is straightened without a GH, meaning constrained. Yes, so constrained. V'tashlichehu atzato, and his counsel shall cast him down. Now let's go back to the Gemarah, because that comes on over here. So Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says the steps of his strength shall be constrained. In other words, he's lacking in confidence. He doesn't have that spring in his step when you no longer have your wife. And then Rabbi Abahu quotes the end of that pasuk we've just said. V'tashlichehu atzato, his counsel falls. And it quotes this pasuk, his counsel shall cast him down. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that when you have your spouse and you have an idea, you have something to discuss, what do? You go back and you discuss it with your spouse.
Yeah. Is that a good idea? Oh.
Yeah, is that a good idea? No. Is that a good idea? Yes. And once that is gone, that's very difficult. And so here it's describing the hue. We just had a share from Michael about the psychology of the characters in Tanakh. This Gemarah here is giving us a lesson on the psychology of bereavement. And it's very difficult. That this is what the Gemarah is telling us, that bereavement, and it's talking particularly, of course, about one's first love, as it were. It's very difficult, and the rabbis here are just giving quotes from Tanakh to give support to the idea that bereavement is very, very hard.
We seem to have, all the last three paragraphs talk about bereavement, and we seem to have moved away from divorce. So they're going to circle round again to divorce, or have we left that behind?
Okay, good observation. I'm going to come to you in a second, Jeff. Yeah. Julie's observation is that we started with divorce and now we've come to bereavement. Are we going to circle to divorce? We're actually going to circle next to shidduchim, actually. So we're going back to the beginning of the relationship as opposed to the end of the relationship. Are we going to, what's the connection? Obviously, the connection is that remember what they were saying, Julia, is that one should not divorce flippantly. We're not talking about a divorce which needed to happen, but a flippant divorce. They're telling you, if you divorce your first wife flippantly, wrongly, you'll regret it because your first wife has all the
Yeah, divorce is like bereavement in a
attributes
sense.
I'm sure that's right. I'm sure that's right. Divorce is like bereavement, and particularly a divorce that shouldn't happen, Michael. If there's a divorce that needs to happen, well, maybe that's not so much like a bereavement, but a divorce that shouldn't happen, which is what the Gemarah is talking about. Yeah, it probably is like a bereavement. Let's just do the next little bit of Gemarah because it's a nice place to end on. We won't end on something miserable like bereavement. Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is a very famous piece of Gemarah. A very famous piece of Gemarah. When you hear it, you'll recognize it. Gemarah says like this: Kasher lezavugam.
Zivugam.
I can't read this here. Lezavugam, it says here in my Gemarah. But anyway, lezavugam, kekriyat yamsuf. Finding a match, making a shidduch, is as difficult as splitting the Red Sea. Right? That's how difficult it is to make a shidduch. There's a famous midrash that says what after Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world and did all the things that he did. What did he do for the rest of the time after he'd finished creating the world? And the midrash says he was busy making shidduchim. Right? Busy making shidduchim. It's a hard job making shidduchim. Anybody made a shidduch? Anyone made a successful shidduch? Yes, Julia, tell us about your shidduch that you made.
No, not really. When I was at university, I introduced a friend from my hometown of Leeds to one of my flatmates. They became an extremely happy couple. Actually, it is quite an interesting story. Well, firstly, they stopped talking to me, but they remain very happy. And secondly, after 50 years, I found out that they're very close friends with the people who live at the back of me in Israel, who are Israeli.
There you go. And they're still married after 50
And
years?
they are still very happily married. Yes,
there you
but
go,
still
Julia.
not talking to me.
Julia achieves Gan Eden. There's another midrash that says that anybody that makes a successful shidduch achieves their Gan Eden, whatever that means. So there you are, Julia. I can also put my hand up. I made one shidduch in my successful shidduch, but I'm not sure it counts for my Gan Eden because I had a very, very strong vested interest because it was my son. So probably doesn't count because you probably have to make a altruistic shidduch like Julia did to get your Gan Eden. It was Akiva. I made the Akiva's.
My daughter-in-law is a shadchan, and it's very, very, very hard work. She spends life doing it.
Yeah, very, very hard work. You don't get Gan Eden for nothing. So this famous Gemarah says like this: it's as difficult to make a shidduch as it is to split the Red Sea. And of course, we need to have a scriptural support for that. You can't just make some bold statement like that. Gemarah doesn't like that and without a scriptural support. So the Gemarah brings us a pasuk from Tehillim. Let me take you to the Tehillim, chapter 68. There we go.
We don't see it on the screen.
Can you see it on the screen?
No.
Oh dear. Okay. Well.
Yes.
Yes. You can see it now.
No.
Yeah. Yes.
No.
God makes a solitary dwell in a house. He brings out prisoners into prosperity.
There we go. Verse 7. God settles the solitary in a house. He takes the prisoners out at the most opportune time, but the rebellious dwell in an arid land. Let's have a look at that in the Hebrew. Elohim moshiv yechidim baita. God moshiv. What's a moshav? A settlement. So God settles. What's a yachid? Yachid comes from the word echad, an individual. God settles an individual, baita, in a house or in a home. What did we say earlier on? That the word bayit is a euphemism for wife. So here you have a direct quote in Tehillim that God makes shidduchim. Elohim moshiv yechidim baita. God settles individuals with their wife or with their spouse. So the Gemarah gives us that scriptural proof of the statement that they said that God is the one that makes these shidduchim. And of course, what is it that God also did? God did Kriyat Yamsuf, and only God could make Kriyat Yamsuf, and therefore they say it's like God made the shidduchim, therefore it's like doing Kriyat Yamsuf. And the Gemarah goes on to say the end of that pasuk, Motzi asirim bakosharot. He brings out prisoners, asirim. Where do we have that word? Matir asurim, yes. We brings out prisoners, bakosharot, translated here as into prosperity. The Gemarah says, al tikri motzi asirim. Don't read out that he brings out asirim, ela ke motzi asirim. It's like bringing out prisoners. In other words, making a shidduch is like bringing out prisoners into prosperity. Which prisoners did he bring out to prosperity?
The Jews from Egypt.
Bnei Yisrael from Egypt. And how did they get out? Via Kriyat Yamsuf. So there you have your origin of this support for the concept that making a shidduch is done by God, and it's as difficult as doing Kriyat Yamsuf. We'll just finish this little piece of Gemarah. Al Tikrei. So since the Gemarah is saying, well, don't read it like this, read it like that, we bring another one. Al Tikrei bakosharot. Don't read it as into prosperity. Ella, rather split it up into two words. Ella Bechi v'shirot. Can you see that word? If you take kosharot, you can split it into two. Bechi and shirot. What's bechi? What's bechi? Crying. And shirot? Singing. Singing, right? Crying and singing, right? What situation was there crying and singing?
The splitting of the Red Sea.
Splitting of the Red Sea. We did the singing. Shira. The Egyptians did the crying.
Crying with joy, though.
Right? Oh, we can't be. No, Bechi, I don't think he's crying with joy. I think Bechi is crying with weeping. Yeah. So a lovely scriptural.
That's clever. That's very clever.
Yeah, a lovely scriptural proof to end on. That
Johnny.
We'll end on that with singing and weeping. Making a shidduch is like splitting the Red Sea. Just before you say what you're going to say, Jackie, just a little. You'll like this, Jackie, because it's right up your street. This is going to be a little teaser for next week. Next week's shiur is going to start over here. They're going to ask a question. Hang on a minute. What about this making shidduch business? I thought it was already preordained. The Gemarah says, Arba'im yom kodem yetzirat avlad bat kol yotzet v'omeret bat ploni leploni. 40 days before conception even, a divine voice emerges and says, the daughter of so-and-so will be married to the daughter of so-and-so. So it's all sort of spiritual, Kabbalistic, all sorts of stuff. We're going to be talking about that next week. Michael, don't look on because it'll spoil it for you. That's what we'll do next week. Yes, Jackie?
Do you remember I sent you the thing about David and Bathsheba? And I said
Yes.
that David's story's been... Well, if you go back to the first little bit you did today about from Ezekiel, where they cried...
Okay, so I spoke to the people in the morning, and in the evening my wife died. This is from Yecheskel. Kodesh Baruch Hu said, your wife's going to die and you're not allowed to cry about it.
No, about the marriage, where the angels cried over the divorce.
I see. Okay, that was from Malachi, not Yecheskel.
Yes, sorry, Malachi.
Malachi,
So that gives credence to my theory about the Kabbalistic view, as you just said, though, that all matches are made in heaven from the angels, and they cried because there was a divorce. If they make the first wife their marriage and it gets divorced, they're upset because it's gone wrong. Okay,
right. Hold that thought for a week, Jackie, because the Gemarah is going to disagree with you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, don't look on. Okay, don't look on in the Gemarah, but I have looked on, you'll be surprised to know. And the Gemarah is going to disagree with you a little. It's going to agree with you a bit and disagree with you a bit as well. So there you have a teaser for next week. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
John, I don't think that's-
Thank